What's up, y'all? It's Johnny King for another episode of the Johnny King Show. I am stoked to have Lucas Mack in the house. Thanks for being here, man.
Brother, thank you for having me. Thank
Absolutely. Yeah. So you are, I mean, we just recorded a podcast for your podcast where
Yeah,
you were recording me. So this is fun to flip the script a little bit. You're, it seems like you're a jack of all trades. You've done so much stuff. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're a podcast host, you're um, a consultant, it seems like a
yeah.
healing catalyst, you're a coach. What else did I miss? You're a father, you're a husband,
Yeah. Musician. Dude,
musician. That's right. You got music on your website. Absolutely. What else? You did TEDx talk,
yeah,
but you work with, companies like Microsoft, right?
yeah,
And a
yeah.
lot of other big companies just doing, but then you've also found yourself on a lot of ABC, NBC, Fox. You've done a lot of different things in your life already. So very
Yeah.
accomplished. It's very cool. What is of all of that? What do you feel like you kind of associate yourself to now? What do you identify yourself as?
Mhm.
Coach or all things?
It's funny. My wife and I went on this hike the other night. We got an hour and a half of childcare. And so we're like, all right, see you. And
Oh
we went on
yes.
this hike. And my wife and I were talking about this of because we were just reflecting on all the different things that I have done, and she very similar have done many things. And my answer to what doing all this stuff is I think I've just been trying to explore the fullness of who I am.
Mm,
And for so long, growing up the way I grew up, it was just so fucked up. And I couldn't express who I was. Music was actually the thing that saved my life. I put a lot of the pain and trauma into music. But I was an athlete. I did, different things. I don't know. I think what it people ask that because that's a common question. Like, what do you do? And I have a heart. I want to see the hurting get healed and the healed go out and heal others. That's really
mhm.
my true heart's essence. I just happen to apply that to a few different applications. So
Why not, right? It's
yeah.
it's yeah, it's universal for sure.
Mm.
Um, before we get too far into your story, because I certainly want to get into it. Um, but since it's kind of relevant just in my mind and what you're just talking about, it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you've got a pretty powerful marriage that has helped you through some of the serious shit that you've been through,
Yes. Yes.
um, what are some of the key for someone who's not married, such as myself,
Mm.
even though I have been married, but to those that are listening, what do you feel like are some of the key attributes of finding that right partner who can help you? Because I feel like a lot of guys probably don't want to come out with their trauma or their pain because they're
Mhm.
scared that ultimately people are going to leave them. They're going to be alone.
Yeah.
They're damaged goods. Like, dude, you've been through it through your marriage, right?
Yes. Yes.
With kids and everything else. Like, that's some heavy stuff for a marriage to go through, and you guys have kept it together. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, man, brother, it's almost like pre-healing and post-healing because I've been married almost 15 years in
Mm,
August, and have three children, nine. Our oldest just turned 9, and then I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. They're about to hit that 7 and 5 mark, and they remind me almost daily.
yeah.
um, and but when I met my wife, we got married very young. I got married. I was 24 years old, a month away from 25, so I was almost 25 years old. My wife had just graduated college,
Mm,
and so our journey was somewhat unique. It's not normal. We were the earliest that we knew of all our friends that got married. Um, Also, the earliest, even though we waited a while to have children, the earliest
mhm,
to have children, and we were so focused on career. I was a TV reporter. I was on air, hosted my own segments, and we're in that game is to jump markets, to go to, New York's number 1, LA's 2, Chicago's 3, San Francisco's 4, Dallas is 5. I mean, I could give you the whole map of how that is.
mm,
And I went from market 126 to market 37, which was a massive jump. So this tiny little market down to San Antonio, and my wife and I were married 1 month, and I drove her down to San Antonio, Texas. She had never even seen Texas,
Oh,
and
damn.
it was pretty wild. And it was a beautiful journey, but I wasn't really, for so long, I was caught up in justifying my life. And what I mean by that is when I was 20 years old, I tried to kill myself. I attempted suicide, and I never looked prior to 20 ever, not one time. And that is like, it was like dead to me. I died prior to that.
Mm.
Um, so I meet my wife at 22. We get married 2 years later. Like that's really when my life began. So I kept
Wow.
everything present on career and journey and what can we do and what can we create together. Um, and things were great. I mean, she's an incredible person. But it was when I had my first child and I was running my own company. I had employees and dealing with people claiming they're not getting paid enough and I'm not making any money. And I had my first baby, and I had this obsessive desire to prove that I was good enough, that I was that that I really what I was seeking is my father's love,
Mm.
something that was never going to be given.
Mm.
And when I had my first baby, we bring her home from the hospital, and I go to work that day. I
Mm.
mean, I was really fucked up. I am no model of.
Mm.
There's no shiny object with me. Let me tell you, I've done a lot of things because I was pursuing love and trying to get validation.
Yep.
Um, but I go to work, and my wife, you know, that started building some resentment.
Sure.
And then here I am trying to change a diaper, which I had no issue, not like, but I couldn't bathe her because it started triggering memories, and I would push them out, and I can't bathe her. And I told my wife, well, one time, you know, something happened to me in a shower when I was 7, like, and she and I, because we're so conditioned to, of our own choosing, just stay
Mm-hmm.
in the present moment,
Mm-hmm.
that she didn't ask me deeper questions, nor was I willing to even go deeper. It was just
Right.
like, I can't bathe her. It was like a visceral, I can't be around her. I could barely change a diaper. And so I start putting more time, effort, energy into work. I was like, if I could get $1 million in revenue, like that is statistically, like companies that get $1 million don't go out. 90% of all businesses that make $1 million in revenue don't go out of business. Like this is what it is. And I was working so hard. And you know, I was always like, when I was a TV reporter, that's what I was known as. Like, oh, I'm the reporter, I'm the guy, whatever. Then I owned my agency, and I was like, oh, that's the business owner, that's the
Mm-hmm.
young entrepreneur. And I was like really hung up on these titles. Um, so I started working even more. And I mean, I am the model of what not to do. I forgot my wife's birthday, and her love language is acts of service
Gifts.
and gifts. And I
Yeah.
literally, I didn't forget that morning. I remembered. I mean, I knew it was her birthday, but I go to work. The day was crappy. The clients are complaining. I'm dealing with all this stuff, and I'm driving home, and I'm just stuck in my own stuff. I get home, and I'm just unloading about my day. She doesn't say a thing, and I'm laying in bed. She had already fallen asleep, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, so I got up at 2 a.m, went to a drugstore, got all the balloons, everything I could find. I decked, but it was, the damage was done.
Too little, too late.
It
Yeah.
was too late. It was
Yeah.
actually worse probably than I did all
Yeah.
that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
um, so that, when I share these stories, like my marriage, my wife is just, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for my wife. That is a fact. But it wasn't until, years later, and I had ended up having baby 2 and baby 3, and I had an emotional affair with an employee of mine.
Mm.
And that's when things started, just, I hit rock bottom. Thank God it wasn't anything other than that, but it was enough. I finally told my wife, and it devastated her illusion of, I'm this perfect guy that, yeah, I've hurt her and frustrated, but I could give a dissertation on the Bible. I was
Mm-hmm.
striving for perfection. I was I looked a certain way, I acted a certain way, but then I caused massive hurt in her life.
Sure.
It I didn't even know what to do with it. I started having flashbacks. So the emotional affair was just I would do anything to feel better. I started hating myself. Like I couldn't bathe my kids. Well, what's wrong with me? Like I must be
Mhm.
broken. Am I broken? Am I wrong? Like something inherently is broken in me. My wiring isn't working and I hated myself. And then she would say, don't you want to be here with the family? And I'd be like cognitively, like that's the right thing to say. Yes. Why don't I want to? No, if I was being honest, I don't really want to be here. Home has never been a safe place for me. I've just gone from childhood home to now I'm creating a home with you. But you put expectations on me, obligate, all these things by default. It's interesting. I'm feeling this like energy of it, but that's how it was.
Mhm.
And so I would do anything to escape. I started drinking like a fish and um, watching stupid, binging on TV or media and just like checking out. And finally hit rock bottom where I told her, I had an inappropriate relationship with an employee. And that was the catalyst um, for my healing journey. And, and I started having flashbacks because I told my parents that night like a kid. I call here I am married, three kids, married, successful, quote unquote, on paper, published
Mhm.
author, all these things. And I call my parents to confess like I'm a little child. This is the model.
Sure.
And and my dad said something to me, and when he said it, it was like I went through Star Wars where they go through hyperdrive.
Mhm.
The stars are like, and all of a sudden I was back. I was having flashbacks, and I was first person back into horrible positions. And brother, I didn't. There was a point that was a Sunday night. The following night, I'm talking to my wife. I'm sitting on the ground and I'm rubbing the rug with my hands. I could not tell if I was there where she was, and I'm like, "Are you here?" I mean, it was intense. And what's funny? I hear the word flashback, and I used to judge people. Talk about Bob, like, oh, you're so weak. I mean, I had no mercy for anyone. It was like grind it
Mm.
out, like grit it out, like get after it, attack it. Like I would listen to all those, Eric Thomas, and like, if you want something more, you can breathe. Like you guys are
Yeah.
weak, But dude, I was just dying slowly.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't until I went through those flashbacks and I went to therapy that week. I got in on a Thursday and I never missed a week of therapy for 2 years straight, sometimes
Mm.
going twice a week. And then I went to ALA, and that's when everything really changed for me. But so you asked about my marriage. I gave you a long answer because I don't want it to sound like, oh yeah, my like, dude, it was my
Yeah.
wife's incredible. She's a saint. And I remember going after this is after ALA.
And ALA, for those that don't know, is what?
Ascension Leadership Academy, but it's an emotional intelligence training.
Mhm.
There's many there. It's just there's a model of leadership, and for me, it was very healing training at this thing. But I'm walking. We had at our house, we had a daylight basement, so I could see her as I'm going down the stairs. She's sitting on the couch, and she's reading, and I just like a normal day. And I'm walking down the stairs, and it like hits me like, man, she really loves me. And I go, you really love me. And she goes, what? I go like, no, you really love me. Like, yeah, I really love you. And I started just bawling. I could cry right now. Like just, man, I needed someone just to love me, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Uh, so it's been a journey, brother. That's why I was like, well, what do you do? I don't know, man. I'm just on this journey of life.
Yeah.
I know, I can go into the darkness with people because I've lived in the darkness. I can, when I coach people, it's like there is nothing too dirty, too shameful, too ugly. It's like
Right.
I've lived it, I've experienced it, and we can heal from it. However, in no way am I claiming like thus saith, me.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just living like everyone else.
Right. Well, have you watched that documentary, The Leaving Neverland?
Yes.
Like the two boys that were with Michael Jackson, the longest. And for those of you that haven't watched it, it's the documentary of like, two boys that kind of go through the whole brainwashing and the sexual abuse of Michael Jackson with them as little boys. It's like they loved him truly so much but they didn't really start to have uh the correlation between it being like inappropriate or just like maybe different until they had their children. They both had boys, I think, at the same ages that they were when the abuse started, that it was like, oh, this is for them to think that, this was happening to their children would be like, hell no, right?
Yes.
And so it kind of sounds like in a different way, kind of how that stuff started coming back for you, right?
Very similar. In fact, I had a hard time watching that because
Oh, I'm sure.
it
Yeah.
was really difficult. I cried a lot watching that. But part of it, I would just get so angry. Like, how could you do, like,
Yeah.
children are innocent, like
Hmm.
innocent. And it is the most fucked up concept that religion teaches to hit children in the name of love, saying that that's a virtue.
Mm.
Um, I I speak a lot about not spanking. I did this TED talk, Breaking the Cycle of Child Abuse.
Yeah.
Um, but the word spank, the etymology of the word spank is to make a horse run faster.
Mm.
So it's people, I ask people all the time, were you hit as a child? They say, no, I wasn't hit. And then I ask them, okay, were you spanked as a child? Well, yeah, I was spanked.
Yeah,
And then
sure.
there's like, wait, there's a weird gap
Hmm.
in between associating what actually happened versus these. NLP is very powerful. I mean, I know it can be used for good, but these same people that know how to use things for good, there's another group that knows how to use these words for bad.
Hmm.
And why wouldn't you say hit a child? Well, because that sounds heinous. Who would hit a child?
Hmm.
But if you say spank a child, like, oh yeah, spank a child.
Sure. Yeah.
Sounds like that's what you do, right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, I don't even know where I was going with that, but oh yeah, having my own children, I look at especially my son, and man, it's hard because he would do things that I remember I would do, and I'm fighting this urge in me of like this ingrained behavior of what should happen to him
Yeah.
from what happened to me, even though I would never do it. And so it was this war inside of me, and it was intense, brother. Like
Uh,
super intense, man.
I cannot imagine. Well, yeah, I mean, I think about that too. Even as you're saying that, I'm like, do I feel like there's anything wrong with being spanked when I was little? No. But when you say that, I'm like, yeah, I definitely was spanked. I definitely got my mouth washed out with soap, which was kind of traumatic,
Yeah, for
just
sure.
like,
For sure.
you're pouring like what? But I know that in all instances, like my parents were doing it from love per se, or
Right.
as a like consequence of me saying, you know,
Shit or yeah.
not even
Yeah, right. Right.
saying hate, or
Wow.
fart or penis, it's like,
Wow.
um, and the spanking wasn't that bad, but it definitely sounded like you got the full court press when you were a little guy. How
Right.
long did that go on, if you don't mind me asking? Was it a couple times? Was it years? Was it?
No, years.
Yeah.
I mean, I would fly out of my body. The last significant thing, and I talk about this in the TED talk, is it was the summer of going in from fifth grade to sixth grade, and I'm getting beat with a bullwhip in the garage, and I'm hovering over my body watching it happen. And it wasn't like whipping me, it doubled it up or maybe triple, I don't know, but it was. And it's just I would say to this, what do kids want? We just want to be held.
Sure. Just to be loved.
Just want to be loved. Like we don't. Would our behavior change if we were hugged more than hit more? Yes.
Yeah.
So and then people say, and this is not the attack, and this is the hard thing of healing and parents and relationships and family lines. But when I coach people, like this is not attacking your parents. There's no judgment on them. They did all they knew how to do, but it's not about them anymore. It's about your
Mm.
story and where your narrative falls in. And I said, if they really loved you, why didn't they beat you to death? if you're going to use that logic of like, well, because they love me, they hit, not you per se, but anyone,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
logic. And like, well, then why, they obviously didn't love you enough to the shit out of you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like my dad must have really loved me. I mean, the way he
yeah.
beat me. No, that's not love. Um, and I think and religion usually is, um, unfortunately a big catalyst for this behavior, and it justifies this behavior. And I think maybe when I was going through ALA, I was like, the word spare, they claim, but the word, this saying, spare the rod, spoil the child, that isn't a verse. It's a compilation of a couple of verses in Proverbs from the King James Bible. But, they make it sound like spare means withholding. Like if you withhold the rod, you're going to spoil the child. But then I'm like, well, what is spare parts, spare time, spare change, spare tire? That all means extra. So if you use that in an extra way than it was intended to use, you do spoil that child. Yes, you do. But what do you spoil the child's view of? Unconditional love, safety, self-worth,
Hmm. Hmm.
validation, being known, seen, loved, heard, all these things. So yeah, you better believe you spoil that child. Um, so I get passionate on these things, and I don't want to deviate so much, but these sayings we just accept, like, oh yeah, that's just the way it is, or yeah, I was spanked. And I used to say this too, like, yeah, I was spanked, I got belts, and it made me tough, it made me strong, maybe who I am. But who was I? I was a dude that left my wife and brand new baby at home, going back to work, trying to close a deal or some stupid thing that doesn't even matter. And I can't even tell you who that client was to this day. And
Mm.
so that's been my journey, brother.
No, I mean, I made some of the similar, let's say, similar kind of um, disjointed decisions in my earlier relationships when I was younger, and that's the thing. You're really not thinking about the other person at all. I was truly in survival, um, and the intent wasn't malicious ever. But talk about thoughtless. you know,
Yeah.
kind of callous, and yeah, I can see how she could create a story to fall out of love with someone for sure, 100%.
Mhm.
So I give you guys credit, and sometimes maybe the kids is what keeps you in it, keeps you in the fight,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is there's a double-edged sword to that as well. But
Yeah.
I commend you guys for going through the through the fire and back, man,
Thank you, brother.
'cause
It's
it's
been
yeah,
fun. She went to ALA. She did her own healing journey. She's been on her own
amazing.
path, and it's been beautiful to walk like side by side. And
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Well, speaking of, I don't want you to get in trouble, because when we were recording the podcast before, your dog was barking and
I know, and then
shat on
did
the
some
floor, and then
damage.
well,
Yeah.
and he's still
Yeah.
barking. Are you sure it's not dropping you any nuggets out there?
Well, I think he's empty now, so we'll be okay. But
Okay,
let
okay.
me go. Let me go check real quick. Let me go
Yeah,
check.
yeah, yeah. Go check. But for those of you that are listening, I met Lucas through another one of my previous podcast guests, Johnny Elsasser. And Lucas has been through some serious, serious stuff, but he's just one of those guys that you meet um, that just has energetically, just has a heart of gold, and truly comes. You should see the video that we're recording of this podcast all over his wall. There's different things on love and faith and joy. And what I love about him too is that just he's a positive example of what's possible when you face your fears and your trauma. So definitely would be something that you'd want to check out. And um, I think, Lucas, if you tell me too, what if people wanted to kind of just continue learning more about you and your story, your podcast is the Golden Rule Revolution, right?
Yeah, the Golden Rule Revolution. Yeah,
And
yeah.
tell those that are listening a little bit more about that too.
Well,
What's the
originally,
approach?
thanks, brother. Originally, it was truly, I saw what was coming back in 2017. I wrote a book called The Golden Rule Revolution, discussing the three things you're told never to talk about: money, politics, and religion.
Mm,
And having Jewish family, um, I've seen what happens when a revolution, when that rhetoric of revolution gets into a society, it can turn violent and isolates groups. So at first, before ALA, I was like, from fear, trying to protect myself, protect others, and protect people. Um, as a warning, like the golden rule is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then Hillel the elder, a revered and famous Jewish rabbi said, "That which you deem hateful unto yourself, do not do unto another."
Mm.
And he said that before Jesus came and said, "Do." So there's a double-edged sword, or there's two sides to that coin. There's don't do and do, and to stay in that conscious awareness. And so that was the purpose of the Golden Rule Revolution. But really, it's mapped my spiritual journey. Like I did this podcast, Why I Left Christianity to Find the Love of God. Um, and I interview just beautiful souls, and we hear their
Mm.
story. And sometimes I'll do solo episodes and do teaching episodes. Sometimes we just talk, and like your episode's one of my favorite episodes. Just here I am, in the unvarnished, like, or varnish, whatever, polished, whatever. It's like, this is me. And I think I've been around, and I've been a keynote speaker on a billionaires, uh, all these billionaires gathered on a cruise in South China Sea. Like I've done a lot of things with a lot of people and a lot of names and a lot of this. At the end of the day, who cares? Like I
Right.
find like, what does it matter? If it matters, are we loving? Are we
Mm.
permission for others to be vulnerable and to take their masks off and to tell
Mm.
their story? And usually, and I don't want to harp on too much of the pain stuff, usually when we do the work, we come on the other side, and it's freaking glorious. It's like,
Mm.
man, I am the hero of my own story, and I truly am. I am the hero of my own
100%.
story,
Yeah.
and help others, that they don't look to another person like, oh, I wish I could be like that. Like, no, you are intended to be exactly who you are.
Yeah.
And you are you, as the literal you, Johnny King, but
Yeah.
ye, plural you, everyone listening, you are so beautiful. And I want to reclaim that word in the masculine
Mm-hmm.
as much as it's been used in the feminine sense, is
Yeah.
that beauty is something to be revered. It's something to be looked at. It's something to be honored. And when we can see our stories as something that is beautiful, who can ever point a finger at us and say we're less than anymore? And
Mm.
so that's the beautiful thing about going through, as opposed to trying to avoid the pain. It's like once you go through it and you come on the other side, it's like it's an invitation for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've mentioned ALA, and I went to MITT up in Los Angeles, and when you're in some of those experiences where they do a really good job of creating a container that's safe and everyone's vulnerable and like no masks or walls, like everyone is just like beaming. Talk about like beautiful. You're like, holy shit, man, woman, child, whomever, like in this room, you're like, beautiful, beautiful. That's the really cool thing, because you're right. When you said it, I was like, that's what I remember. But in my day to day, it's just easy to get just lost in the funk,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
traffic and
Yeah.
bills and you know Facebook ads and like
Yeah.
whatever. It's like all the stuff that
Yeah.
goes on
Totally.
with running the business of a personal brand. It's very easy to get disconnected with what is beautiful,
Right. Right.
and so I think that's the challenge of this day to day, is being able to balance that. It's
Yeah.
the gratitude for the moment, the gratitude for your wife and your kids, and
Yeah.
but then also being able to keep moving forward in this human experience as long as we're here.
Mhm. Yeah.
how,
That's right.
how do you how do you find that balance with everything that you've been through and
Mm.
all the things that you're working on now? I mean, do you feel like you've gotten through the majority of the big blocks, the big rocks that were in your way, and now it's just fine tuning?
Yeah. That's a really good question, because I think, well, yeah, I've gone through the big blocks. And what I was saying on my podcast before we started recording with yours is, in October, my wife asked me a question out of the blue, like out of the blue,
This past October.
this past October. And
Yeah.
she asked me this question that, um, destroyed me.
Mm.
And she didn't mean to. She was curious of like what was going on, and something, even what she was curious of what was going on with me, had nothing to do with in my day-to-day behavior. It was more like the longevity of her knowing me.
Mm.
Um, because I would be very uncomfortable if we watch like a sex scene. Like the sexual trauma is just pervasively, like it was ingrained in me. And so she wanted to know if there was something else going on or whatever. And she asked me this question, and it just detonated and destroyed my whole
Mm.
thing. But what it thankfully it did, because I'd have these images that come in my head all the time, and I just kick them out, kick them out, kick them out, kick them out,
Mm,
kick them out. And um, I was forced to face it. And I drive up. I was actually not going to come. It's going to end my life in October 14th in 2020. And I drive up to Snoqualmie Pass, and I call my brother just so. And I want to give context. Like, I wasn't struggling. I wasn't suicidal. It was just the last block that you were saying. It was this thing that I couldn't look at. I can't perform surgery on myself. And that's what this thing did. It opened me up, and I didn't know what to do with this question. And I was just tired of the pain and these images and the self-hatred of my body and the stuff. I mean, abuse is so nasty because it
mhm,
doesn't just the physical scars. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I have a huge pain tolerance. I'm really tough. I'm the big man. I'm 6'3", 240.
mhm,
Like, I'm not a small guy, and I'm not soft. I'm really strong. And yet this question just destroyed me. And,
mhm,
uh, and I was just done. I just like this life, like my kids are so beautiful. And I didn't want to end my life because I love my kids and I love my wife, but I just couldn't, I don't know, this suicide such a lie, because the what it gives is the answer of no more suffering, no more pain. And I have so much compassion and empathy for people that just want the pain and suffering to end, and yet
mhm.
it can end, and it doesn't have to be the end of the story.
Right.
um but I called my brother this day just so he knew, someone knew where I was, because I just left and didn't tell anyone. And I didn't want to hear, don't tell me the right answer, don't tell me the thing. I know, like, I know all the answers, don't tell me the thing. I just want you to know where I am. And I was hysterical. And he's like, whoa, he just tell me one, just give me one thing, And I said, well, I have this image of flashing in my head all the time, and I kick it out. And he's like, he stopped. And he goes, I have that same image. And, we grew up in the same house. And it was all I needed to, like, someone flicked a lighter on in a pitch black room. And I was like, what? And I was able to travel out of that darkness. And he shared his experience and I shared my experience. And I realized, okay. And his experience of similar things was he had a different perspective on his body than I did.
Mm,
And I hated my body.
mm,
And that sounds even weird, as no guy I have ever heard talk about, like, I hated my body, but like, I hated my body. That's not even
mhm,
that's no hyperbole there.
mhm,
Um, but when he said that, and he said, I've just learned to, like, love myself for who I am and enjoy myself. I was like, never like even thought of that concept. Like, wait,
mhm,
what?
mhm.
And, and I was able to get out of that darkness. So I don't even know where I was going with this, brother. What question did you ask me that I go down this
Well,
story?
well, no, I'll get around to that first question, but what makes me also think about is when you're saying the original story, how you remembered it was your wife's birthday in the morning, but then you got so bogged in the shit of life
Yep.
that you
Yep.
got through the rest of the day, and it wasn't until you had a moment of clarity at 2 a.m. Oh shit,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
that I've had those experiences a little bit here and there where you're so in your thought, you're not thinking about where you're driving, who you're with, like what's going on. And I think so many people have this like concept of like, oh, someone who commits suicide, like, how could they? They left, you're not even, I don't even
Sure.
think that you're thinking about your wife or your kid. You're literally like, I'm in massive pain, get
Yes.
me out.
Yes.
Right.
That's it. That's it.
And I think it's pretty good that you reached out to your brother. And I started to get a little teary eyed myself because I'm I've got two of my brothers and two sisters, but there's definitely things that being able to connect with family members who've been through similar experiences and kind of makes you feel, hey, you're not alone,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right.
But in that moment, you said you kind of, lit that match or lit that lighter for a moment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, did it bring you towards, what did it bring you towards? Bring it towards like, oh, I'm not alone and someone was there as well? Or what was it that resembled for you or symbolized him kind of connecting with the same similar experiences.
No, I have this visual of it. Even when I was driving home later that afternoon, I have this vision. Like I was in an arena and someone just flicked the light on in the upper deck corner, like a little LED light, and it
Mm,
was enough for me to realize that there was what I was in was not all there was. So
mhm,
that contrast in what I was, and I traveled out
mm,
like through that little tiny light,
mm,
and that's what hope. Hope is a powerful tool. It's like I had hope in that contrast that there was a different way to look at what I
mm,
have gone through. And there's no accidents. That week I had lined up a breathwork session. It was supposed to be Monday through Friday, ended up being Tuesday through Saturday because I missed the Monday. That it was a personal session with this former special forces guy, and him and his wife. I'm like a mess on that Tuesday, and they're like, hey, they held space for me. They're bawling, they're healing. And
amazing.
it was just ordained, divinely ordained how it all worked out. And now I can talk about, and I probably people are like, well, what question? So I've asked, I'm not hiding from that at all. It's just, I don't want to, there's part of, I've had to learn what recounting the story is versus telling enough of the story so people understand that we're all in this journey together. And then what's the result and how do we come out of that, how do we
Right.
face it, versus like I could talk about all the abuse I've gone through and the details and the horrific nature of it. And for a long time that's what I did talk about because I wanted people to relate or understand, like, oh no, you have no idea, like, but what matters is, man, we can heal, we can all heal, we can
Mhm.
all heal.
100%. Well, but you're right. I mean, I think the listeners, I'm sure there's so many people like, well, what did she ask you, or what is it the thing that your dad asked or said to you when you
Mhm.
called that one time that trickled? Like it is almost irrelevant, but it is like it's the
Yeah, what was
natural
it?
the curiosity of the listener is like, what was it? That, but it doesn't matter because it could be something that could be so minuscule, but it just for whatever reason it triggers for you, right?
Yeah,
And
and
opens
well,
things
it's a
up.
fine line too because they're still alive, and I'm not trying to, one of the
Mhm,
visions that I have for doing these healing events that we're eventually going to start doing when things open up is give the perpetrators the opportunity to come forth and heal as well. And
mhm,
there's part of the, I mean, I would love it if perpetrators and victims all come and heal, and we do what Billy Graham did for 5 decades with thousands, tens of thousands, 75,000 people in a stadium, and just an invitation, an altar call per se, but not for religion and not for accepting of truth outside yourself, but to like
yeah,
just heal. Let us
mm,
hold you. Do you need to be held? Do you need to be loved? Do you need to be, are you a perpetrator? And so there is a fine line between telling my story, which is true, and my experience and my massive trauma versus I don't want to tell someone else's story, even though what their actions are my story because their actions to me. It's an interesting line that I'm navigating still right now. And I support some abuse networks, and one gal I was talking to, I said, did her dad had passed, she's older, she might be in her late 40s, early 50s, and I said, did he ever admit it? She said he never admitted it. And I'm like, that's how it is. Then when I told you like how amazing it is, like I remember I'm on the phone in downtown Bellevue, which is another city outside Seattle, and I'm
mhm,
like, tell the truth, tell the fucking truth. And
mm,
it just couldn't do it.
mm,
Wouldn't do it. And which provoked me to pull more, like trying to find out, well, who are you? What is this whole thing, which led to this other whole thing. But yeah, that's what I'm navigating is like, how do I share enough of my story versus like other people's story? Hey, Baba. um,
little extra guest speaker,
yeah, that's right. That's
right?
right.
But I think with the thing that I'm hearing too is like it's yes, we all have our stories. Some might be uh audibly more interesting to listen to and get, be more captivating. Be like, well, what, at the end of the day, the story isn't so much the issue because we all have our own stories,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's more about the healing.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that's what truly is. And that's what I was saying when you went to go, clean up, or check on the dog there for a second, was like, what I love about you is that you are an example of what's possible,
Mm.
which that I think is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, you know, purposes in life, is to be like, can I be that beacon of light to say, like, in this, you know, let's say cave that's been steeped full of darkness for millions of years,
Mm.
how long does it take for one like match, to light up the whole place? It's just, it doesn't matter how long the darkness has been there, but one match shows that, oh, it can illuminate a lot, right?
Right.
And it
Right.
seems, I love just your story because you've been through hell and back in many regards,
Yeah.
and to have a healthy life beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Into the woods, into the darkness, out of the woods, into the sunlight, where you can still be that powerful husband,
Yeah.
that protector, that father, just
Right.
that human being in society, that can let go of, like, to be someone who's been the perpetrator and done those things, and not be, there's got to be so much pain and shame that
Yep.
comes with that, and
Yep.
not be able to acknowledge it. Like, what, that's, if you can't talk about it, then that's on you, and
Yep.
you get to
Yep.
work on that in this lifetime or the
Or the
next. But
next. Yep.
I'm going to at least heal and forgive and move on and move forward in that regard. And that's what I love about your story, because that's what I think. There are so many men out there that I come across that are or that are hurting so badly,
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
included, in different ways.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to get that out,
Yep.
right?
Dude. And
Otherwise it festers and it just eats you up from the inside out.
from the inside out. And I guess for guys listening, for anyone, but specifically men and women that are married to men or dating guys, healing is the most powerful thing that we can do. It is not the weakest thing that we can do. This word has been stripped. All these words have been stripped of their power intentionally, so that men who are to hold the divine masculine, to truly, let me say this real quick before I say that. Women have two X chromosomes, and
Mm-hmm.
an X can receive on every side. That means that their gift naturally is to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
They talk and they share about their emotions, and that is a natural, beautiful gift that women have.
Mm-hmm.
Men have an added gift, responsibility, or opportunity, and that is they have the X chromosome, but then they have the Y chromosome. And that Y chromosome, to me, and this is what I teach to guys in the retreats and to everyone, it symbolizes the feminine and masculine in balance. Vulnerability, being able to receive love again, and create and take and build the world that we want to live, and build the life that we want to live. And what happens is, and this is why I really would love people to sit with this concept we've talked about, is spanking. When we're children and we're open to receiving everything, like life's just, there's no limits to the day and time and thought and creation, but someone hurts us. We learn very early on to be open and vulnerable is equal to being hurt. And we
Mm-hmm.
close that down. And so the why goes like this, and it just slides off. So then men have a hard time receiving. And here's what I have learned in Hebrew. So I have a Jewish side, and so I study with rabbis and I study Hebrew. The word in Hebrew for love is ahava, and ahava means to give. So love means to give.
Mm-hmm.
However, the greatest act of love, and I learned this from my wife, the greatest act of love I could give her is to receive her love.
Mm-hmm.
And she said this to me one time at a retreat. She said, I feel like you're like a bathtub with a drain plug missing, and I could fill the tub up and it immediately just drains out. And she said, you say your love language is words of affirmation, but it's never enough. And I, in that moment, realized my fear, because I was afraid, everyone listen, I was afraid my dad would take my life. Even up until I gave my TED talk in 2019. I thought he was going to kill me. In fact, Katie Lynn, a coach that I had at the time, asked me if it was worth giving my life for this message. And I said yes. And she said, well, then give it. And I gave it, but I was truly afraid that he was going to kill me for giving that message.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I was afraid those closest to me were going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'd backed that vulnerability down 99.999%, I still had a sheath around my heart with my wife, even through all the healing. We'd gone through all the stuff. We'd gone through ALA. We'd gone through, but when she told me that I can't fill your tub up enough, and I looked at her and I felt her rejection
Mm-hmm.
because her love wasn't enough, and rejection always leads to resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I realized the greatest act of love I could give her is to finally say, you, for me, you could kill me if you want to, but I'm going to receive your love. And me receiving her love was my act of giving her love, which made her feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
So it says in Hebrews that and we know our God is a consuming fire. The fire is the only element that can consume and emit at the exact same time. There's no
Yeah,
sequence of releasing and receiving, releasing and receiving of nature.
that.
It is emitting and receiving at the exact same time. So I've learned that when we as men can learn to be vulnerable again and open back up, the why becomes back in balance of the feminine and masculine. We can receive again. And when we are safe enough to receive love and have the courage to stand in that, women feel safe enough to receive love as
Amen.
well.
Amen. Yeah, man. I mean, that came up just recently in my coaching call with my coach. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
have to create. It doesn't mean that men always have to ultimately create that safe place to land first. It definitely, there's times that wife's got to be strong and husband's got to be, or
Yeah.
husband and husband or wife and wife. It doesn't matter in that sense, but someone's definitely have to lead. But there is a part of it where, you know, if it happens every once in a while, okay. But if it's continual to where she can never actually feel like she can trust
Yeah.
in being able to give or receive that love in the relationship, then, or she, or I should say just the feminine, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be definitely issues there, trust issues,
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
100%. So
Yeah.
that's that's pretty profound, pretty powerful of what you guys work through, and the fact that you're still
Still
alive
here.
and kicking, you're still here, you know, you have a little guy or little gal that's coming in saying, "Hey, daddy, what's going on?"
Yeah.
It's pretty special. So, man, what a journey. I definitely feel like I could talk to you all day, every day, but in the spirit of wrapping things up and dinner time, and everything else going on, what tell the listeners a little bit more about the work that you do, the retreats, all that stuff in terms of how they can connect with you. But
Thanks,
yeah, I'd
brother.
love to learn a little bit more about the work and the retreats and everything else you got going on.
Thanks, brother. For content podcasts, I put a lot of episodes out, have a lot of beautiful souls. Johnny's going to be on very soon. The podcast is called The Golden Rule Revolution. Um, I do a lot of content on Instagram and got some really cool courses coming out with Gordana Burnett about healing key memories. It's going to be really cool.
Mm,
Some other courses coming out with some beautiful people, but go to my website. If you're men need a safe space to get away to heal, and so the retreats have been unbelievable. I've had veterans, police officers, accountants,
mm,
exterminators. Like I've had all
yeah.
sorts of young, old,
Yeah.
and like coming out of MITT where people look different physically, like they glow. That physical healing that takes place from that, or that glow that comes from the emotional side of healing, is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
but I coach everyone, men, women, and yeah, brother, I appreciate you. I just want you to know that. And like I said, it started my podcast episode. I just want you to know how much beauty I see in you, and thank you. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, right back at you. And I was mentioning that when you were tending to the dog too. Just there's certain people that you meet that have, and Johnny's one of them too. The other Johnny, just like great, just great energy of love and like abundance. And there's no sense of like, I don't know. It's just it's hard almost to put into words, but love,
Yeah.
and I mentioned this all over behind you on the wall is
Yeah.
what you stand for and what you emit, so I give that back to you 100 times over, but I really appreciate it. Definitely looking forward to many more conversations. And if people want to connect with you, it's just lucasmack.com. What's the
Yep.
best way to connect?
lucasmack.com. Shoot me an email.
Yeah.
Find me on Instagram, and let's create some beauty together.
I love that. I love that. And if you're listening, take a moment after you're done here and go follow the Golden Rule Revolution and his podcast. He's up to some amazing things and one of the biggest hearts of gold I've met in a long time. So thank you, Lucas. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Thanks for listening, you guys. Till next time, we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.